Brothers and sisters in Christ, today we hear the gospel message of the young rich man who went to ask Christ what he needed to do for eternal life. And Christ tells him, follow the commandments. Well, I've done all these things. So Christ then says, all right, we'll add the next level. If you want to be perfect, go sell all you have, give to the poor, and come follow me. These are very powerful words. But remember, it does say, if you want to be perfect. Most of us in the Christian life are not perfectionists, nor maybe should we be. We strive for progress, not perfection. And hopefully, by the end of our life, we are at that point. And it's a great challenge, because every time we hear this gospel, we can't water this gospel down. It is what it is. And throughout the history of the church, people have taken this gospel seriously. One of our greatest saints, St. Anthony the Great, was a young rich man. And he went to church and he heard this gospel. His parents had recently died, so he was suddenly in possession of all the wealth in the family. And he heard this gospel and he was moved in his heart, and he said, that's what I want to do. I want to follow Christ. I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to scrabble and protect this little hoard of money and property that has fallen to me. That's not life. That's struggle and hardship and stress. And so, what did he decide to do? He decided to become a monk. He renounced the world. He went to live in the desert, became one of the greatest saints in the history of the church. Amazing, kind of a Superman, if you will. If you ever want to understand what a Christian superhero looks like, read the life of St. Anthony by St. Athanasius the Great. It will knock your socks off to see the struggle that this young man endured in the desert fighting Satan himself. So what do we do? Well, if God moves your heart and calls you, and you hear that calling, come follow me, take it seriously. Being a monastic is a blessed life. It's not for everybody. It's for the few, the strong, the proud. Just like being a Marine. It's like the Marines of the church. The rest of us have to settle with being typical soldiery. Not special forces, right? But how do we relate to our property and our possessions so that at least we are making progress towards that perfection? And this is the trick. Because isn't it so easy to get attached to all of our stuff? And the more stuff we have, the more mired into it that we become. How many of us sometimes wonder, I felt so free and so carefree when I was in college and I was a poor student and I had nothing, no two nickels to rub together, as they say. And I thought, all I want is to have a good car and a good house and a nice yard and this and that and the other. And then you got all those things. And it was not home ownership, but home moanership. Right? Worry, struggle. All of a sudden now, I have to stick with what I'm doing. I have to be afraid for my job. I have to be worried about all my income. I have to be concerned with all these things that before, somehow I got by. Or we have children, and then you can't make excuses. You can't go back to living that carefree life. You're responsible now for other people. People with special needs. Children are the original special needs people. So it's very, very challenging. How are we called to live this life? Well, we can glean some wisdom from the services of the church. For example, if you don't become a monastic, the church also says, well, maybe you should consider becoming a married person. And in the wonderful service of matrimony in the church, one of my favorite lines is a prayer for the couple that they may have abundance in all things. Why? That having abundance, they may serve others and may provide for others. marriage remains sociologically, economically, historically, the most stable foundation of civilization, the stable relationship upon which prosperity is built. And if you're living that married life, that can be a fountain of prosperity. If you want to see how hard it is, just talk to your friends who have been divorced and see all of a sudden when you split that two-earner potential into two separate households, how hard it immediately becomes, how challenging life becomes. So the married life becomes a fountain for us of stability and prosperity. But the point of that prosperity should never be so that we can live high on the hog, so that we can enjoy all these things that we always thought were going to be so great. It's so that we can provide for children, for the future, and for others who are in need. Not just our own blood, but our neighbor, the stranger, the homeless, those who are in need of food and shelter and drink. All those things that Christ has made very clear will be judged about. So if you want to have the right relationship to your wealth and your possessions, live in the understanding as if you were a monastic. A monastic makes a vow of poverty. That is to say, they say, I do not own any of this. One of the greatest images of poverty is in the wonderful movie The Island. It's a Russian film. It's Ostrog, I think it is. Ostrog? Yeah. And there's a monk who's kind of a fool for Christ. But everybody realizes he's a holy man and he has some kind of wisdom. They don't understand it. So even the abbot decides he's going to move in with this holy fool. And the holy fool is the coalman who keeps the furnace running in this icy place on the, I don't know where it's at, on the Baltic Sea or somewhere very far north in Russia. And he sleeps on the coal pile. He has nothing. He sleeps next to the furnace on the coal pile. It's amazing he doesn't die of some kind of emphysema. So the abbot moves in and he brings with him his big down comforter. And he tells them, like, oh, this is my special comforter and my nice boots that the Metropolitan of so-and-so gave to me. And he cuddles up and he gets all cozy and he thinks he's going to learn what it means to be a holy monk from this fool. And what happens? He wakes up in the middle of the night and he sees the holy fool is taking his nice patent leather boots and throwing them into the furnace. And then he takes his down comforter and he throws it out into the sea. And he says, what are you doing? My things, my things. What are you doing? He says, I'm slaying demons. I'm killing demons. Because even for that humble abbot who was willing to sleep on the coal pile, even he had become unnaturally attached to physical things. To live perfectly as Christ did means to have no ownership in the passing things of this world. So if we want to understand the ultimately right relationship to possessions, that is, do not be possessed by them. Understand that you are only the steward of these things. Radical stewardship is the monastic way, and actually the Christian way. Do not be possessed by your possessions, but to understand you are only the steward of them, a caretaker of these gifts that you have been given. You may have built that, your business or your wealth or whatever it is. You are the agent of your own success. This is true. But you did have help, but that's irrelevant. What's relevant is what you do with what you've received. That's the key. What you do with these blessings. What you do with what you've been given. What you built. Do you do it for the glory of God or for your own glory? Do you do it so that you may have abundance for others to do good works? Or do you do it for selfish gain? That's what God is looking for from us, brothers and sisters. So let us seek perfection one day at a time, knowing that God is the source of all perfection. Let us ask Him to help us day by day shed our earthly cares and cling more and more to the heavens. For Christ is among us.